With all the recent talk about racism, police brutality, I thought it would be good on Bridges if we sat down with law enforcement and talk about how, as Christians, we can come together and be the salt and light and bring and keep our community together. Welcome to Bridges. I'm Monica Schmelter, and I'm so glad that you could be with us today. And I'm especially excited that today we can sit down with law enforcement and talk about some of the issues and the challenges that are facing us in our communities today. And I am so happy to have you with us today, Chief Hambrick.
Glad to be here, Monica.
Good to have you again.
Yes, ma'am.
And Captain, it's so good to have you here today.
Yes, ma'am. Glad to be here.
Tell me a little bit about your role in our police department.
Sure. So I'm the police captain, which is a third in command position at the department. There's various duties that I have, but really the administrative services side of things, budget, our court records, dispatch, but really a big part of that is community relations and being there for our community engagement team and working with the community and keeping them informed about what we do as a police department.
And really, Captain and Chief Hambrick, you've been working to do that or working with our community for a long time. We're very blessed to have you as our chief. When I think of, for example, Coffee with the Cop, that's an opportunity for our community to know our law enforcement, correct?
Sure. And then we're still doing it. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to sustain it through this period of COVID-19.
Right. But, yeah, that stopped so much of everything. Yeah.
But we're still through other mediums try to connect with our community and keep our community informed, as Captain has said. But it's a big part of what we do.
Yes.
And needed.
It is needed. And I know even on Facebook you all post about things that happen in the community and how you respond, and it just helps people stay connected. And so we see, Chief Hambrick, just in our country right now, so many huge issues and challenges, and I would like to know your thoughts on that and what, I know that you're a Christian believer as well. How can we best come together and face these issues?
Well, Monica, we, again, I've been asked the question, especially after the George Floyd.
Yes.
I'll just call it what it is, the killing of George Floyd.
That's
right. And it's wrong, and I'll say that, not because he was a black man.
Right.
That tactic was wrong, period,
yes,
in spite of color. But I was asked and have been asked, what is the Mount Juliet Police Department going to do now after this event? And I'm saying, we're going to do what we've been doing. It's not that we're perfect, but we've tried to do it in the right way. And so we're going to still try to build and forge better relationships with our community, keep our community connected and informed, and just continue to be a good part of, and a good partner in our community, and strengthen relationships. And we've been doing that, trying to do that for years now, and not just any incident or this latest incident that has come about. We don't play down the thing about police brutality in America, and in the world for that matter. We do know that there is an issue, but that's a small percentage of, for the most part, men and women that are in this profession, they come to work and they're here because they want to be here, and they do it the right way, the majority of them. And unfortunately, we have those that don't do it the right way. And so we stand and we speak against police brutality, injustice, and things like that. And so we're committed, our department, and I have great men and women that I serve that, are here, and they're doing it the right way, and I couldn't be more proud of our department.
And putting lives on the line every single day and handling the most challenging situations, that anybody could imagine. And so I appreciate that, as you mentioned the George Floyd incident, that it's a killing. I mean, I don't think that as believers or as citizens, we should pretend that doesn't happen.
Correct.
I think we have to say it. We saw it in anybody that wasn't horrified by that, and yet it is a small percentage, but we have to respond. And I think that that's what you're saying.
Right.
And Captain, for you in working with the community, what do you say in response to the George Floyd killing, and how can we best come together and understand that that is a small percentage, we got to deal with it, but it's not all the story?
Well, I think it goes back to what Chief said about relationships with the community. And you have to have that strong bond, that strong connection with the community before something like this happens. You know, we should always be working to build trust.
Yes.
And I think, you know, when we first started community policing, it started way before I got there. You were there as a community coordinator. You know, you rose up to the ranks, and that was handed to me. And we continue that relationship. Now our methods of connecting with the community change over time.
Sure.
Whether in Chief's time back in the day was more one-on-one interaction, community meetings. Now people are busier on social media. That medium has moved a lot to internet-based communication like Facebook Live, Periscope, what goes out on Twitter.
Sure.
But communication is key to any strong relationship.
Absolutely.
Whether it's a relationship with your husband or wife, you have to have good communication. But with a relationship with the community, you have to have good communication. And what we see where police departments end up in this negative light when something happens is you look back and you see, well, they didn't have a good relationship to begin with. You know, and then something terrible happens, and then it's even harder to recover from that terrible incident because there's no community trust.
Right. And people are already upset. So whatever the event is just escalates it and exacerbates all of that. Chief, what can citizens, like someone like me and those people that are watching, how can we most be helpful and respectful and, you know, understand that you have a really hard job in so many ways?
We have hearing one another. And I say the same thing as it relates to racial discord. Being open and being honest to say that there is a problem in America, and we don't shy away from that. There is work to be done. But I've been asked about, you know, whether it's a big conference or a big march or big this or big, I don't feel that that's what is needed. This dynamic will shift when we have dialogue one-on-one with people that are not like us. And whether that be color or race, whether that be law enforcement and everyday citizens, it's when you having those communication and hearing one another. And when people come to know you, I've had a pastor in this community, he says it's like this: it's hard to hate close up.
You know, it is.
And so,
it is.
So when you get close up and learn and understand and have a relationship and build a relationship and hear one another out, it's easier. And that's where I believe the groundwork will be done and change will take place.
Yeah, and I think that, Chief, as you're saying, it takes a risk on all of our parts to talk to people that are not like us and to listen. To listen to a person's heart that maybe has felt shoved aside or mistreated or like they're held under suspicion because of their race. So you're saying we are acknowledging that race can be an issue in our culture.
Sure. It's, to give you perspective, from a numbers, because I had heard somebody bring this up, where there are more whites killed than blacks by police, from a numbers perspective in a year. And they're correct if you purely go by the numbers.
Yes.
But from the percentage, putting the same scenario out there, blacks are killed 2.5 times, grew up more than whites in the same environment, if you would put that same scenario. And so that's where the problem in acknowledging that, if you never acknowledge it, then you can't deal with it effectively. And so we have to acknowledge it and understand that we have work to do.
Yes.
And,
we do, in our thoughts and in our perceptions. A woman that's a friend of mine said that she feels that her husband, who is African American, is viewed with suspicion even when he walks in a store. That his experience is different
Right.
than a Caucasian man. And so here's the thing, if we all say, no, that's not true, I'm not that way, we don't move forward.
Right.
I think saying that, yes, that can and does happen helps us. Do you think that, Captain?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you have to be humble that everyone comes from different backgrounds. Everyone has different perceptions and perspective in life. And so that's why we all have to be open to that communication, so we learn about each other. So we learn how someone thinks the way they do, right? And that's where it's equally important with law enforcement for us to communicate and educate about what we do, so people then understand why law enforcement has to do things a certain way.
Right.
You know, and there's times when someone may see an interaction of law enforcement, say, responding to a bank alarm, right? Officers have their firearms out, they're following procedure, they have the bank surrounded. We'll hear rumor that they think there's a hostage situation at the bank. But in reality, it's not. But their perception, they see police, they see the interaction, they automatically assume it could be something serious.
Sure.
In regards, that's normal response to a simple false alarm activation, right, to the bank. So you have to be humble to the fact that everyone comes from different backgrounds and they have different perceptions and different perspective about stuff that happens.
Right. And that we can learn, like Chief Hambrick, when I just heard you say that percentage-wise, in the same situations, that 2.5 times, is that what you said?
Correct.
More African Americans are killed than whites by police. Well, see, I had never heard that figure until you just said that.
And that's right. And again, we have to get away from the cliches. We got to get away from those things that we see and be real. And I like being real. And I say this because you hear this all the time. Well, I don't see color. And I'm like, well, are you blind? I see color.
Of course.
But what we have to get at, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The color doesn't matter.
Right.
And Captain just said a strong word, when we humble ourselves.
Yes.
Because the scripture says that when we humble ourselves, and that's a part of it. And then it's not whether we're going to agree on everything, but we have to have respect one for another. And regardless of race, regardless of gender, and anything like that, we have to have respect for one another.
We do. The dignity of human life. So we've got to take a break. We want you to stay with us. When we come back today on Bridges, we'll have more in just a moment.
Prayer changes things. If you need prayer, call 615-754-0039 or email prayer@ctntv.org. If you're looking for ways to grow your faith, we invite you to go to monicaschmelzer.com, where you can watch Bridges interviews and Monica's teachings on demand. You'll also find free online extras that offer practical ways to live out your faith. Visit monicaschmelzer.com, where you'll find hope, because truth changes everything.
If you're just joining us on Bridges today, we're sitting down and talking with law enforcement about how all of us can work together to keep our community safe and to keep communication going. And Chief Hambrick, before the break, you had just mentioned, well, actually, Captain had mentioned the quality of being humble. Does that apply both to police and to citizens?
Absolutely. And the law enforcement community, we've had to understand that in the past, there has been a dynamic that has a perception of us against them, that type of mentality. And we have to humble ourselves and understand, and we here at the Mount Juliet Police Department have never operated that way. We try our best to, one, be professional, to be approachable, and to have great communications. And we have open doors and open platforms to where we embrace our community and we want the conversation and the input, whether when we're doing good and if you see things that we need to be challenged on.
Yeah, we need to be able to have the conversation. And Captain, there are probably many people in communities that are watching that don't have all of this work going on, where there's all of this two-way communication. What could someone as law enforcement or as a citizen, what would be some ways that people could open up the conversation so it doesn't have to be, you guys against us, that we can work together to keep things safe?
Right, and I think we see where we have maybe paved ways or examples for other agencies that now kind of follow what we do here. We've been that leading agency in a lot of our communication efforts where, in fact, it used to be shamed upon us that we communicated as much as we did by other law enforcement because that wasn't the norm.
Right.
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 So I think it's important, just start communicating with your community, right? Start having interaction with them that's positive interaction. Yeah. You don't want your community to always see you do enforcement-based activity.
Yeah, because that's what, raises the fear. If you're always seeing that, I know that I've had to sometimes tell myself, when you see a police officer, this is peace. This is a person that's coming to help.
Right.
It's not, and sometimes in the way that we view things, and I think as citizens, sometimes we need to change our perceptions and expectations and understand more the big picture of what's going on.
Sure. Right, exactly. And you don't want your community to look at you as enforcers of the law. You want them to look at you as guardians of your community, who are there to keep you safe, who are there to help you, who are there to serve you, and whatever you may need.
Yes.
Whether it's it's funny, there was a call the other day of a snake in someone's house, right? And would you think law enforcement would want to go to that? Probably not.
No.
And we wouldn't I couldn't do it. But we found an officer on the shift who didn't mind snakes. And so he went and got the large snake out of this lady's house.
See,
right?
that's so wonderful.
It's just something simple like that.
Oh, I would never even think to call the police for something like that. But I think these are the things that people don't see, the wonderful things that officers do all of the time. We see, the problems. And again, we need to talk about those problems and we need to come up with good solutions and ways through. But I think we also need to understand as citizens and as law enforcement that everything in life has challenges. We live in a fallen world. And so nothing is ever going to be perfect, but we can all give 100% of our time and attention, and we can all do our best. And, Chief Hambrick, you said something, when people say they don't see color, are they blind? And that's what I wonder too, because we do, right? We see color.
Yes.
We see gender. I have eyes. We see this. And so to try to live in denial, to me, doesn't make any sense.
That's right.
But how do we open the conversation about racism and us against them? What steps do we take?
You have to be this, and I'll use this word, intentional. Have to be intentional in wanting to bring about a change, wanting to do something. And again, having conversations and having good interaction. Some of the things that we do, and I would challenge law enforcement, other law enforcement agencies, don't worry about what people are going to say about you. We get chastised for and for we have popsicle patrol. We have popsicle patrol where our officers go out in the communities and they interact with kids and they're handing out and people, we
people
get criticized some, but every encounter is an opportunity.
Yes, it is.
And that's what it's about. It's minimal in cost or anything, but it's building something. And that's what we have to do. We're building something and we're making impressions on these kids because we have to guard against when we're going to Walmart or any place else, when we're going to those places and a person, a mother, for example, sees us with their kids and it's to the kid, if you don't stop, he's going to take you to jail. So immediately that's putting fear and putting a wedge or a wall between us and that child. And we pray against parents doing that. But on the other side, we have to be intentional in being in our community and doing those things. And whether we get criticized or not, I'm grateful at opportunities that our department has and uses those opportunities to build relationships and when you build the relationships, then you're able to sit down and have meaningful conversations about things, race and other
Yes.
things. And because then you've built a trust.
Yes.
Because if you have built that trust, you can talk all day long. And it's just words.
Because no one believes it.
Right.
Right. You have to have the trust. What do you think, Chief, about the protests and the different things that go on? Are those helpful to building trust, to healing?
Well, you know, I believe there's a platform for protests, and protests and all the devastation and the things that we see happening around the country, those things are not protests. Matter of fact, when you have lootings and riotings and destruction, that takes away from the narrative of where the focus should be. And the issue is not what's being addressed,
Right.
because you're dealing with this other.
Right.
And so, but peaceful protests certainly gives voice and gives some focus to issues that it should be. But again, I don't think even a march or a protest can take the place of sitting down, you and I sitting down, having a meaningful conversation, hearing one another and learning about one another.
Yeah, because what we're talking about, and you use the word intentional, and it also takes time. Like there is no quick fix to the things that we're talking about. It's a long way through, but we can do it. And if we understand it's all to our benefit. As citizens in a community, right, we want it safe, we want it peaceful. You know, I don't want to be around looting or rioting. That's frightening. You know, I lived in the inner city of Detroit when I was a little girl, and I went through those riots and that looting. And I remember as a little girl that my biggest fear was that I would be shot on my way to school. And children shouldn't have to live with that.
Absolutely
And I
not.
think
That's
that
right.
that's why now citizens need to open up that conversation. Don't you think so, Captain, with law enforcement, and say, what can we do to work together here?
Yeah, they do, and law enforcement's point is we have to ensure that door is
Yes.
there,
Yeah.
so it can be open. Sometimes we have to open that door so we can have that good interaction, right? Because we're not having people knocking down our doors to come talk to us, right?
Right.
So we have to provide those opportunities, whether it's coffee with a cop, popsicle patrol, our social media live, Facebook Live engagements where we can have the engagement back and forth
Yeah.
over that. So we have to provide that avenue there.
Yeah, I love seeing
So
your
important.
Facebook page.
Great.
When you tell us like what happened and
Sure.
what officers did, it just it makes me feel safe. It's like, okay, so they've got this. This is happening. Do you give adults popsicles on Popsicle Patrol if we come out there?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, those are things, when our officers are out there, man, they're doing it, and not only are they doing it in action, man, they have a heart of wanting to be out there to do it. And that's what you see transpiring.
Yes.
And I applaud our men and women again. It's a culture that we built, and we thank our community, because our community has responded in kind to us.
That's
that
wonderful.
we're not challenged with some of the things that other communities are doing
And we're
this time.
not, because of all the hard work that you're doing. And do you know what I'm saying? Like you've been building this trust for years. It's not just in response to these recent problems. So we're almost out of time, but I do want to ask you, Chief Hambrick, in all of this, in the building of community, there are hard situations that you have to handle.
Sure.
Where you have to apprehend someone. What are like your rules and your protocols in Mount Juliet of when something bad happens and you have to respond?
Well, one thing, as you just said, our policies and procedures and things that we have in place are for our men and women to follow. One, policing, again, professionally, being approachable, doing the things the right way. It's always the right time to do the right thing.
Yes.
And so doing those things. But if we have people that are someone that doesn't do that,
Yes.
then what has to happen is the word accountability. You have to hold people accountable for
Yes.
the actions that they're doing. And we haven't seen any major incidents, but when we do have a complaint or anything like that, we hold our people accountable. And that's, you have to ensure that.
Yes.
And unfortunately, that hadn't been the way that many agencies across our nation
Right.
has went. But we're grateful for, again, for our community. We're not perfect, but we're trying to do it the right way here in Mount Juliet.
And you are. And I think as citizens that we should be praying for our leadership. And in other areas where there are more problems, we need to pray. We need to have that conversation so that we can have that healing. And we're blessed to have you. And I thank you all so much for your service. It's been so good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Stay tuned. Monica will be right back with closing comments. For more information on today's guest, visit the website on your screen.
Don't give in. God's word says you're an overcomer. If you hadn't done blah, 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 this wouldn't have happened. And let me say this to you. If you think that you are in a mess of your own making, you are still an overcomer. When that temptation comes, you want to make sure that you are dressed for battle. Therefore, put on every piece of God's armor so you will be able to resist the enemy in the time of evil. It takes training. It takes discipline. And so when you're fighting that good fight of the faith, you take your story, whatever it is, and you saturate it in faith, and you fight for it.
Visit monicaschmelter.com to schedule Monica to speak at your next event.
We talked a lot about a lot of things today on Bridges, from racism to police brutality to the community working together. And in this final moment, I want us to take a look, each of us, at ourselves. And what does the Bible teach us about loving our neighbor and respecting those in authority? We're told clearly in Scripture to pray for those in authority. We're told that those that obey the law don't need to fear the law because nothing bad is going to happen if we're doing the right thing. So in the midst of all of the arguments, the divisions, the rhetoric, the protests, the rioting, the looting, one of our responsibilities is to look at ourselves and to say, do I have the right heart? Do I have the right attitude? Am I doing the right things? Am I praying for leadership? And so I want to give you this challenge today. Pray for law enforcement in your community, for your chief, for your captain, for your officers. Every single day, they put their lives on the line to keep us safe. And are there ever problems? Absolutely. And are there things that we need to deal with? Yes, there are. But even with all of that, that doesn't absolve us of not only our responsibility, but our privilege to pray for law enforcement and to respect law enforcement. They are here to keep us safe, to keep peace in our communities. So let's each do our part. We're out of time, we've got to go, but we say goodbye and God bless you.